He's kind of like the Joe Rogan of the hospitality industry right now.
Welcome back, Slick Talkers. This episode is brought to you by our amazing friends at Send Squared. If you are looking for the #1 hospitality CRM that enables you to take control of your business, get more direct bookings, and know your guests better, then go to sendsquared.com today to learn more. Now we're on to the episode. Welcome back, Slick Talkers. This episode is one that I've been wanting to do for a while, and I'm super thankful and glad that Jeff sat down with me on this podcast. So Jeff Lowe, the CEO and founder of Stash Hotel Rewards, we had a great pre-chat discussion that carried into today's conversation on the podcast, where normally it's about a 30-minute topic or a 30-minute discussion getting to know my guests, but then we went over an hour. And Jeff in this episode talks about the state of loyalty from where it was over 15 years ago to where we are today and what they've seen with Stash Hotel Rewards. But on top of the OTAs getting bigger and bigger and how hoteliers are kind of losing their independence. And on top of the OTAs, the brands getting bigger than ever before, which loses control and the ability to sometimes execute great hospitality. So I'm excited for this episode. I hope you enjoy. Stay tuned throughout the whole conversation because there's a lot to unpack. So let's begin. You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, Jeff Lowe, CEO and founder of Stash Hotel Rewards. How are we doing today, my friend?
Great. I'm excited to continue our conversation. I've really enjoyed the other time we spoke, and seems like there are a couple themes in this business that both of us are very interested in.
Yes, for the listeners, I have to give Jeff his flowers first and foremost, because most of the time when I have guests on the show, they don't do research and like go back and check out episodes and whatnot. But on our pre-chat, as our listeners know, I do a pre-chat with all of my guests, no matter what. And Jeff complimented me on past episodes and was able to like do some research, understand kind of the show structure, whether you're a regular listener or not. And it just shows a lot of intentionality. And so I appreciate you for doing that, because it's a rare thing for people that are joining the show for the first time to actually go and do. It's another podcast.
Well, it's kind of you. So. It's kind of you to say that, and I felt it was somewhat astonishing because I was like, "Isn't that sort of what you bring to the table? Like, at least I have to be aware of the format and the content of what you create is so relevant to all of us." But I'm always amazed, whether it's in a discussion interview or even a job interview, where people, if they haven't done any research on the subject that they're meeting someone about, seems irresponsible. I mentioned that to my kids because you had called it out, and I was like, certainly people should do that research. It's only a courtesy, the proper courtesy.
Well, I think it's the art of hospitality that's been a little bit lost these days, and just wanted to give you a thank you for that, because I don't know if the listeners know how much that, how often that doesn't happen. So outside of that, I'm actually really excited because our conversation, our pre-chat was pretty riveting. Usually they're about 30 minutes. You and I went almost a little over an hour, and probably could have gone another hour. It could have been the episode, right? Like we could have had that just hit publish and minus a couple redactions here and there on some stuff. But I think it was a great conversation, and it's about loyalty and where loyalty stands today. And I think we've lost the definition of loyalty. And so to kind of tell your story a little bit, take us back to 2010 when you started Stash Hotel Rewards, because obviously you saw an issue then, and I want to hear what the problem that you guys are aiming to continue to solve today.
Sure. And thanks again for having me on your podcast. So my background is, I always start with an apology to hoteliers in that before starting Stash, I worked for Expedia, where I was tapped to create their loyalty program, the first loyalty program for an OTA. And in doing that, I learned a lot about how powerful these programs are. After 4 years at Expedia, I left, came down to the Bay Area, and in sort of the Silicon Valley cliche, went to it's actually a shed behind my house versus a garage, and thought about what could be created. And I always say Stash is sort of an obvious idea, right? People prefer independent hotels by any objective measure, whether you look at TripAdvisor ratings or Condé Nast Traveler, best hotels. Nearly all are independent. And those that aren't independent were probably recently soft branded into an autograph. So that's the preference for independent hotels is evident. And then the value of these programs really is somewhat undeniable, that we've been trained since we were young. Don't waste food. Don't leave money on the table. And points are often perceived as that by frequent travelers, like it's a must-have. I would prefer, when we were first coming up with the idea of Stash, we used to do these flights to nowhere, we called them, where we'd get the cheapest ticket you could at SeaTac Airport for $39 to Spokane, and then you'd go in, and then we would just hang out and talk to frequent travelers, find the people with like the platinum label on their American Airlines from American Airlines on their rollerboard, and we would talk to them about what's important of these programs, what's annoying, what do you seek out, and that's what we heard consistently. I would prefer to stay at independent hotels, but I can't, because I can't give up that those points, right? Because that frequent traveler has missed the soccer game and the recital and the Pinewood Derby because they've been traveling all the time, but they're going to make it up to their family because they're going to take them all on vacation and become the hero. I heard that over and over again. So you can have the greatest hotel in the world. To attract business travelers, it's very, very hard. They're going to roll their Toomies past your front door and go stay at the Courtyard by Marriott, because you're asking, your hotel could compete against the Courtyard. Your hotel can't compete against their kids. You lose every time. So the genesis of Stash was really wealth. We could create a comparable program that had the scale and the value and actually make it more simple and better than the chain programs in many ways. Provide it to a core set of visionary independent hoteliers. Then we're leveling the playing field. And if you can level the playing field, then these independents can win against the Marriotts and Hiltons and Hyatts of the world. And so we came out of the gates, and again, people got it. They're like, oh, finally. We heard that both from hoteliers and from travelers. Oh, finally, I don't have to stay at the DoubleTree. I can now stay at that amazing independent, but also earn points for free nights. So that's how it all came together. And so we launched 2010 and have been going strong ever since.
It's a lot of history in there, but one of the things that I took from our call in the beginning, when you were kind of explaining Stash more to me, beyond what I'd known over the last couple of years or even through my previous hotel management days, and you explained Stash more as like a co-op where you get to know the guests a little bit better, more than just their stay with you, but their stay in Atlanta while they're making their way to Denver, and how they were staying at the, insert hotel name here, and how they had a great experience at that hotel. Can you maybe explain the evolution of where Stash started, 2010 to today in this kind of co-op economy / I would say even just more personalized rewards program? Because I'll make a point later that there's these big rewards programs that are hitting huge loyalty representative numbers, but I would really question how much they actually know their traveler. So yeah,
and I would question how much those are real numbers too, when they say that the population of the planet is a part of Bonvoy.
Yeah.
So yeah, when we started, we again, talking to hoteliers and talking to these travelers, what do they like about Marriott Rewards at the time it was called, or Hyatt, World of Hyatt? They like free nights. What do they dislike? I hate that my points expire. I feel like I get ripped off and I go and I'm ready to redeem and they're gone. And I hate blackout dates. So when we designed Stash, we sort of flipped the script in a number of ways. There are no blackout dates. And points never expire. From the hotelier side, hoteliers don't want to be the redemption hotel, because if you're running the Westin in Maui, you could get $300 for a night But if someone is coming redeeming points, you're going to only get a small fraction of what you could of the ADR, typically about a third or less, unless you're hitting some very high occupancy numbers. So those are two things that we changed, and we decided, let's make that better for hoteliers and for consumers. The other thing that Stash addresses is sort of this chain fatigue. No one is writing home to their friend, emailing them and saying, you wouldn't believe this. I have to keep using different names of chain hotels. This Hyatt place. It's just exactly like the other Hyatt place I stayed in Boise. The one in Belize City is astonishingly, it's the exact same. People travel to experience new things, right? And that's what independent hotels provide uniquely, right? They're also run by empowered owner operators often who don't need a 350-page book published by some giant multinational to tell them how they can talk to a guest. And that sounds like an exaggeration, but we have found and hear that this constraints, this sort of industrialized hospitality created by the chains is super frustrating to hoteliers, but also something that travelers no longer are seeking out. So again, Stash provides a chain-like loyalty program without the chain. The hotels in the network each are one of a kind, ranging from a private island off the coast of Belize to a wonderful old antebellum manor in the downtown Atlanta. None are formulaic, right? All of them are one of a kind, and all of them are incredibly highly rated. That is the commitment we made to the initial partners that joined and to our members, that each hotel that's in our network will be as extraordinary as the next. And by that, we measure extraordinary we look at guest reviews primarily. We think I was just at a hotel with a telephone in a bathroom, which used to be the measure or still is of a 5-star hotel by AAA. What is the scenario where that is a relevant need? So that measure is of another century, literally. Instead, we all care most about what did the last 100 people who stayed at that hotel feel about the hotel. So we'll look at TripAdvisor, Google reviews, et cetera. And our standard, our threshold for inclusion is higher than any set of, than any standard that we are aware of, and a set of hotels that are part of a major loyalty program. Just 1 out of 10 hotels that reach out to Stash make the cut. And 90% of our partners are 4.5 or 5.0 in TripAdvisor. In contrast, 50% of Curio, which is Hilton's premier fake independent brand, 50% of their properties in Curio are 4.0 or 3.5 or lower. So half of the hotels in Curio wouldn't fit into Stash because of the guest review measure. That's not because of Stash, right? It's the hoteliers who are making this extraordinary experience. We're just gathering them all. In a long-winded return to your question, and that's this co-op nature. We said, if these inspired independent hoteliers could work together, they could function as a near co-op, similar to, say, Ace Hardware, where they're sharing guests and information about guests in an appropriate way that allow for a better experience for the traveler.
There's one thing I actually I did make a note as you're saying, because I wrote down lost over time, because you're talking about this guide of how hoteliers are feeling constricted by the bigger brands and how to interact with their guests. And I think, if you go to the Horst Schulze, Ritz-Carlton, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, or even saying my name 3 times upon the interaction, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the reason why I wrote lost over time. The intentionality behind that standard was for going back to making people feel valued, to making feel like they're connected, making sure it's not just a transaction. And today, where I was trained at an Autograph Hotel, the name 3 times, it lost its meaning. It was a checklist on my to-do list, basically, rather than something that was enabled me to open up a door for better guest experience. So is that kind of an accurate statement, you would say, or do you think?
Totally, right? Like that the scripted nature of those experiences seem are almost laughable until you go and experience them, right? I stayed at a Ritz-Carlton, and they call you sir. You're like, you don't need to call me sir. And then they wheel the carry-on that you have wheeled the last 3,000 miles up to your room, and then turn on a light, and you're like, I don't need that. It's it's over the top. It's from another era. And so this notion of luxury that is prescribed, it feels, I hate the word authentic, but it feels inauthentic, right? People want to interact with real people. And when you feel that someone is being robotic or following a guideline like that, it's pretty evident pretty quickly. So, and yet that is the model, right? That is, look, I found this book over Christmas. It's Marriott's biography. And when you think about the promise of Marriott, it really started with Holiday Inn. You were driving down the highway on a family vacation and creepy motel. And then there's a Holiday Inn sign in 1950 where you know they're going to have a pool and fried clams in the that's Howard Johnson's in the restaurant. And so you pull over. That was the promise, right? They were promising consistency in a world where your choice had a lot of variability and risk to it, right? Because you check in and then you discover that the room is not great. At a Holiday Inn, you're like, we promise it'll be a clean room. Well, with jump forward 70 years, right? We all have near perfect information about the places we're going to stay. And what Bill has prescribed in this book isn't relevant, right? In fact, you see Marriott trying to run away from its shadow in a way, right? Their commitment to sameness is the opposite of travel, and it's the opposite of what people want now. That's why they're creating these ersatz brands like Indigo, although that's Hyatt, I think, or trying to pull together independent hotels and call them independent and put them into an autograph, which is no longer an independent hotel, right? It is now a franchised hotel that has to follow the same rules that are established at the Courtyard by Marriott. So people have all the information they need. And again, they'll turn and look at user reviews often. And so from the distance, you would say, well, of course, independent hotels are going to thrive, right? In this instance, and with perfect information and the plummeting cost of technology and the ability to connect with guests. And yet they're not, right? Independent hotels are endangered. When we started this, about 40% of the hotels in the US were independent. 15 years later, 20% are independent, and 90% of hotels that are in development right now are affiliated with a chain. And that's discouraging to me. That's like if I come to your town in Denver, so you're going to take me out to this awesome barbecue place in Denver because it's really speaks to the Colorado experience. And we get there and you're like, you won't believe it. It's a Chili's. I'm like, what? You're like, oh, the baby back ribs here are just amazing, right? No one travels for that sameness. It seems like it's so self-evident, and yet that is what's being created as these cookie cutter hotels are being stamped out, not just in the U.S. but around the world. And in the same way that your heart breaks when you see, I don't know, you're going to Japan, you see a McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken. You're like, oh,
yeah.
So that's our mission, and it's really the goal of the hoteliers we work with, right? They are passionate, independent hoteliers who don't want to work for a chain because they want to be able to connect with guests in a real way and don't want to, but also don't need to follow a script.
All right, Slick Talkers, a quick pause from today's conversation while we are here to promote and tell you about our friends at Fido. Fido is the #1 bin to curb service that helps you never forget a trash day ever again. So if you are struggling with getting your trash out on trash day to be picked up so that way your guests aren't having to have the nastiest smell and look and sight of the trash bin overflowing at your vacation rental, then go to getfido.com today. Use the link in the show notes. It's getfido.com/slick-talk, or just, again, make it easy on yourself. Grab that link in the show notes. Let them know that Will from Slick Talk has sent you. And we are back to the episode. Yeah. No, and there's so many ways to go down this route, but I'm curious what that example was that you're saying you had from a place that you stayed at last week. I'm actually dying to know before.
I think it's an interesting contrast. So if you're a Hilton Diamond member or whatever I am with Hilton, it's not the high number. You get, when you check in, you get 2 bottles.
Are you a member of I'm
a member of all their programs. I'm not. I've been blacklisted. No, I haven't been blacklisted. I just haven't stayed enough Hiltons to have any status. But when you get some status when you first join, and so the base level Hilton member gets 2 bottles of Hilton branded water when they check in, which is, I compare that to like giving your wife an iron for her birthday. It's like It's better not to give me anything than 2 flimsy bottles of water, because it effectively says you're not worth a lot to me. And of course, it's not personalized at all. In comparison, so when someone signs up for Stash, they have the ability to go in and fill out their profile and say, here are the things that would make my stay special. This is the kind of pillow I like, or this is the kind of treat I like. And then there's a field form at the bottom that says anything else we should know that we could share with hoteliers. Now, think about that. That's not an opportunity that's with the Bonvoy program, for 2 reasons. I don't think they're collecting that. But even if they were collecting it, the front desk and the team at the hotel is not empowered to do anything with that information. In contrast, I checked into the Bellevue Club Hotel, which is an extraordinary hotel across the lake from Seattle. And in my profile, I had said, I often am working on the road. The thing that I really love, more important to me than a bottle of wine or a buckwheat pillow, is a second monitor so that I can work. And I check in and there's a second monitor in my room. I also say my clothes are often stuffed in the suitcase and irons aren't great. I love a steamer. Steamer's in the room as well. We're not mandating that they do this, but the hotelier, the inspired hotelier, wants to fulfill that guest's wish, right? If they knew it. So we are providing the information to the hotelier and saying, if this is helpful to you to customize that guest experience, then you should do that. And frequently our partners do. And think of what that means. So my colleague, Audrey, has in her profile, she loves peanut butter and she loves chocolate. How hard is it for a hotelier to put some locally sourced Reese's peanut butter cups on her pillow and suddenly change her guest experience? It's not hard to do, but for a chain property, it's not just hard to do, it's not possible. Because if they did it at one of the hotels, what about the next one and the next one, the next one? Literally, one of my friends ran a DoubleTree, and over Halloween, she put out a dish of candy. And when they came by to do the inspection, they gave her points off. They penalized her for having candy on the front desk because it's not part of the SOP. That's true, as crazy as that sounds. Sometimes these examples seem so inane that I can't believe them, but yet they're true.
100%. And it brings me back to part of our pre-chat where I was kind of telling you, like, I feel like the cost of scale isn't worth it anymore. Literally, they're called chains for a reason. If you think about physical chains, you're like, oh my gosh, you feel kind of like you're locked into these unrealistic maybe expectations or standards. And one of the things I was really excited to talk to you about because of that conversation, which I think is leading to a bigger point that you've already kind of hinted at, is the feeling of loyalty. And that's why I have a little bit of a tangent, but data is so important in this industry. And I think people are understanding this more and more, but yet they always talk about data, but never like the actual like practitioner or the execution of using this data. The Reese's peanut butter cup on the pillow type situation, or the second monitor type situation. We all talk about data and getting personalized, but no one actually takes the full execution of it. And I think loyalty today is described as points. When people think of loyalty programs, they think of points. They don't think about, Debbie, who checks me in every time I come in, because she works a 3 p.m. shift and the 3 to 11 p.m. shift, and she always takes care of me. And she knows that at the manager's reception, I don't like beer, but I want wine. And she got my perfect bottle of wine for a nice glass during the manager's reception. Like, that's loyalty, right? Like, I go to that hotel because Debbie creates a good experience. But the old definition of loyalty is that. The new definition is points, points, points. And now I feel like we're kind of getting back to this era of points is great, and it's kind of like the necessary evil, but I want connection. I want Debbie. I want, as one of my buddies, CJ Stan, was telling us about his creating the Danny experience, right? The Danny treatment. Danny is one of their loyalist guests that has stayed with them 10 times, and they've taken care of him. And now anytime a VIP comes in, or a VIP, it's no longer a VIP. They get the Danny treatment. And that is like a personal connection that makes not only the team, but the guests feel something. That's loyalty. And so we're seeing a loyalty shift. I hope. I want to know, you've been in the game of loyalty for 15 years, and how, like, the question I'm trying to, I guess, phrase out of this is, where can more outside of Stash, like where can the independents actually take control of their business again and actually create hospitality? I think we're missing that.
And I think that's an interesting question. In as there seems to be this huge push towards, non-interaction with humans, right? Like that's a sort of a fetish in the industry. I don't understand that. I think, so as long as I've been doing this 20 years, personalization's been the buzzword, right? That everyone talks about and few can act upon. And I think it's partially because it's a nebulous term. And I do certainly think that the notion of points is very different than what true loyalty is. Stowe Shoemaker, who was a big thought leader in this world, says loyalty is a connection to a brand that there are no other brands in your consideration set. You are now fully committed. And the things that will change that can be a status element, but this notion of recognition is really the connection. So I think the two important elements of it that uniquely work well for Stash and our partners is information enough that you can have loyalties. So with a single operator, right? You go to Stoner's Place in Atlanta and they know that you love a gin and tonic. You walk in the door and they give you a gin and tonic. How is the Lennox going to know about that? Well, so Stash provides that set of information that they could look up. And so you could be astonished to find the same amenity when you check into that hotel. But again, the advantage of the independence is empowered employees who are able to act upon that without following a book. The rules in Marriott's 250 page handbook, they have to have that freedom. In the design of the chains, in the design of McDonald's, is not to have any freedom, right? So how could they act on that information? And I think that's why you go to loyalty conferences and it's the same notion of personalization, blah, 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 blah. You know what you end up at Hilton with? 2 bottles of Hilton branded water. Compare that to the Lennox Hotel. In my profile, I mentioned I travel with my daughter who's a vegan. We check in and the room has 6 boxes of Oreo cookies, which you have to figure this out to know is the only mass brand of cookies that are vegan. And so she was astonished. And it was just a wonderful example of what page in the Hyatt handbook does it talk about Oreo cookies, right? It doesn't. Instead, a great example of this autonomy and trust in the employees, which I think is so crucial to providing this connection, is the hotel at Arundel Preserve. April Callahan told me that her guidebook isn't 100 pages or 300 pages. It's a sentence. The sentence is, do whatever it takes to make the guest's stay extraordinary within reason. Imagine your boss telling you that and what that feels like and how now you're going to start being creative and inspired by that level of trust. Compare that to your experience. You've worked at the Autograph. What happens if you said their name twice instead of 3 times? We need to have a talk. It's like, remember Office Space? It was before your time, where the TPS reports, they have to fill out the forms exactly the way they're supposed to. So I think that is why I don't know how you can have real connection in personalization without an empowered team at the hotel. And by empowered, I mean with the flexibility to make choices. And that seems to me to be the opposite of not just the rules of a chain, but the DNA of a chain, right? Their promise, Bill's promise right here, is that no matter where you go, it'll be exactly the same. I have another funny story you'd like to hear about Bill Marriott. It's not in this book, but this is true. Again, some of these stories about chains seem so named that they're true. Marriott, in their rules, up until 10 years ago, had a rule that all bacon had to be 6 inches long. And then maybe this was 15 years ago, so it was the financial crisis. And they're like, we got to start cutting some costs. What about that 8-inch piece of bacon? We're cutting off that and throwing it away. And what about the 4-inch bacon? I don't know what you do with that. So they're like, we've got to convince Bill that actually bacon doesn't have to be of uniform size. So they did a blind taste test where everyone had to be blindfolded to see if bacon of different lengths tasted different. And guess what? It didn't. So it doesn't matter. So then they were able to change the length of bacon, which I believe now can be between 4 inches and 8 inches at a Marriott. But that's at a Marriott, not just at the Fairfield Suites or whatever it's called, but also at the Autograph, right? That's the consistency. Yeah. So that kind of crazy consistency isn't imagined, right? That is the DNA of these brands.
All right, Slick Talkers, one more break in this episode as we are here to tell you about our friends at Hostfully. If you are looking to grow your property management company or even your independent boutique hotel, then you need Hostfully as your property management platform. Hostfully helps sync and integrate your rooms or listings into multiple different channels. They have great integrations with Booking.com, Expedia, Marriott Homes and Villas, and so much more. Or they help you integrate with the best marketplace providers like Hudson Creative Studio to create a Book Direct brand and site for you to maintain control of your business and to use marketing and other tools like Send Squared on top of your business. So that way you are taking control of the guest experience. You own the data, you own the experience, and Hostfully allows you to do that. So for all of our listeners, if you go to the link in the show notes, hostfully.com, and of course, tell them that Will sent you, use the code HFM300 to get your $300 off of onboarding. And if you are like, Will, why should I trust you about this whole Hostfully platform? Well, then don't trust me, trust Frank. If you grab the link in the show notes, there is a link for you to take a demo with Frank, and he will take great care of you, show you the whole platform and the power at your fingertips, not only with their browser or their computer login edition of the program and software, but also their amazing mobile app. So you can manage your business on the go. So thank you to Hostfully for partnering with Slick Talk. And we are back to the episode with Jeff right here on Slick Talk. It's funny you keep the consistency and the standardization of it. Back 60, 70 years ago was an issue, right? Motel this, motel that could have all these different types of settings and experiences. Today it's table stakes, right? Like every hotel, should be clean. It's white sheets. It's a bathroom with a hand towel. Like the standardization piece is great because it is something you can look forward to expect in that terms. But like you say, it kind of restricts the creativity, the freedom to implement new, to create personalized, or even gut instinct. I've been rereading all these books from Setting the Table by Danny Meyer, Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara, Excellence Wins by Horst Schulze, you name it, right? Like these books are all kind of becoming more and more in my, library. And we see this on the short-term rental side, right? Like I was gonna say I'll need to add that one to my collection, as if my office can hold any more books. But you know, the short-term rental side, right? Like with this big boom of Airbnb and short-term rentals and all these things, the standardization piece is now on the opposite side, where there is no consistent standard. There is like a lot of guests didn't know what to expect when they're staying with Jeff or when they're staying with Will or when they're staying with, X, Y, and Z company. So the pendulum has seemed to swing complete opposite left on the hotel side, where it's so standardized. They try to limit the size of bacon, for crying out loud, to the STR side, where it's kind of a free for all Western society, which is no longer the case anymore, out of this post-COVID era. But standardization has a role. I'm just curious in the sense of, where does instinct come into play when it comes to Jeff's experience and the moment I can make with Jeff when he checks in at my hotel, or when he has a bad experience? Maybe we didn't have an inspector see the room and the room was somewhat dirty and the monitor was there, but it was kind of thrown off to the side, or like whatever the situation is, right? To let instinct truly take over. And I have a question around AI and technology for you, but I think it's like we're trying to find this pendulum balance. Instincts for on the property for like us to actually execute good hospitality, like instincts, like the brand went so far left that like now you have to like, it's 6 inches bacon or that's it. If we're going to trim it off and throw it away. Like that's so extreme to then the other side where it's like a free for all, wild, wild west situation. No standards, but then having, I guess, like, I don't know, I'm trying to articulate it cleanly, which is hard these days, but it's not opening up the door for team members on hospitality companies to actually execute good service, to execute good hospitality, because of these standards can go so far one way that it kind of leaves people in limbo.
Well, I think we experience this with Stash where there's, all of our partners don't have a full-time front desk, right? One's an inn or on-site restaurants. And so that uniformity isn't possible. However, I think there's a lot of protection for consumers within guest reviews. Right? As you said, there's a basic standard now. I used to get this question from before of like, independent hotels, do they have a business center? And I'd say, why do you need a business center? What are you printing out your airline ticket?
Yeah.
But now you can see like a hotel that has a 4.5 on TripAdvisor and Google is probably serving the core needs of every traveler. And by the way, you can check to see exactly what their amenities are. And so I don't find that for hotels that operate at a certain level, they're delivering on those core expectations. It's not a shared bathroom and there's an iron, probably, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and if there's not, you could find out about it and you make that active choice when you're deciding where to book. We were just talking about, it was one of the things we do at Stash is when a hotel inquires about joining, there'll be a debate internally about does that fit the program. This hotel that we were just looking at is a very rustic lodge in the middle of a wilderness area in Oregon. Well, it doesn't have perfect Wi-Fi, right? And it doesn't have a concierge, but that's not really relevant. And so I think an informed consumer setting their own expectations about what that stay is going to be like, it is the right way to do it. Because I can tell you, anyone who went to this place, because you can read the TripAdvisor reviews, has an extraordinary time. In part because of that rusticness, right? That's part of the experience. And if they were to knock this down and just put a standardized Hyatt place there, that would be the worst. I think that hotels deliver the core needs now, right? The expectations are for clean sheets and good pillows. And if not, you're going to read about that in the reviews. Yeah. And that's where I always start first on reviews when evaluating hotel or deciding myself where to stay. Because the last 100 people who stayed there is a much better measure than the guy from Fedor's who went by with a white glove 6 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to pivot the conversation a little bit to a fun and exciting topic that we discussed as well. And again, for the listeners, I wish we could have just published our pre-chat in some shape or form because there's so much good conversation from there. But you kind of opened up the door behind membership rates and the way OTAs are getting away with offering lower rates, how hoteliers are losing money in today's world with OTAs because not only with the commission, but membership rates and their backdoor kind of agreement, a way of getting with the lower rates, yet trying to force rate parity on the hotels because, oh, you're cheaper on booking. You can't do that. But at the end of the day, they're offering membership rates. And where do you see membership rates going for hotels? I was telling you about a hotel out here I'm a member of. I pay a yearly fee, but I get a discount on the rooms. I get to spend money on food and beverage and dining and valet. So it's kind of more revenue for them. It's lack of, depending on conventions or other things like that. But I think you learned this and saw this with your time in Expedia before Stash as you were creating their program. But let's talk about the landscape and the history of loyalty rewards today. Obviously, we have Marriott Bonvoy. You have the Hilton Honors Rewards. You have Expedia One Key. You have other programs popping up here and there. I'm wanting to go into why there's this heavy push from the OTAs for loyalty on their end and memberships and those types of things.
So unlike the membership club that you're a part of, that's a distinct animal in my mind. Something like Soho Club or those where you're paying a fee. The rewards programs, ours, Bonvoy, and others are all free. They're free to join. And that's an important distinction when it gets down to at the contractual level of Expedia's agreements with hoteliers. So, since its genesis, Expedia has figured out a way to take extraordinary rent from hoteliers, independents in particular, through their merchant model, where they're reselling the inventory And when Expedia first emerged, they would undercut the hoteliers, right? And the hoteliers said, you can't do that. And Expedia said, well, fine, we're going to have a parity agreement where neither of us can undercut the other. So if the room is $200, and even though they're going to take 20% from that hotelier, so the hotel would be happy to sell that room for $261, they can't do that. That's the agreement. However, the one carve out, this was 15 years ago, was points. Points, you can use points and you can distinguish and discriminate, in the economic term, and discriminate between people who are members and non-members. So I can give you points if you book direct, but you don't get points if you book indirect through an OTA. And that is why the loyalty, the big chains like Marriott and Hilton have about a third of the number of OTA bookings as do independents typically. And that's not a small thing, right? Independent hotels on average have an OTA share of north of 30%, right? So 30% of all your bookings, I'm a hotel with $10 million of room revenue, 30%, $3 million is coming through an OTA. I'm paying 20% of that. $600,000 a year is going out of this system. It doesn't benefit the hotel. It doesn't benefit the guest, importantly. It benefits Barry Diller, who has all the money that he needs. And yet, because the hotel can't guide the consumer to say book direct by lowering the price because of the parity agreement, they're going to continue to book through the OTA. It's just easier. We saw this behavior when we would talk to consumers at Expedia. So points become the magic tool to guide people to book directly with the hotel. Certainly, that's a big part of what Stash provides. When we started this 15 years ago, as you and I were talking about, something has changed recently, really in the last couple of years since OneKey has been created. And OneKey is Expedia's sort of universal program that is hotels.com and VRBO and Expedia. It's mammoth. Yeah. These parity agreements say we can't in general undercut each other unless there's a special club, right? So Expedia has been using that carve out. We've just discovered this, and hoteliers we're talking to are unaware of it, that, for example, anyone who downloads the Expedia app is a member of OneKey and therefore can get these rates that are below the parity agreement, 10%. I was talking to a hotel group in New York 2 weeks ago. They had $250 million of room revenue every year. Really smart guys, you'd think. And I was going to meet with them the next day. So I wanted to stay at their hotel. And it was $400 on their site and $320 on Expedia. Reasonably, I would have booked through Expedia, but I booked directly with them. I said, just so you know, the next day I booked directly with you, but I wouldn't have. And every other person who's coming to your site and then looking at Expedia is going to book indirect as well. They weren't aware that Expedia was doing this. They weren't aware that Expedia is using this carve out within their agreement that says they can undercut the hotel's parity agreement. So BAR, best available rate agreements, it's no longer the standard. They are constantly and consistently undercutting BAR to their now 200 million members who can opt in to join OneKey in 12 seconds. And so I think that's
not even that they're opting in. It's naturally they're being forced to opt in. Like you said, they download the app and immediately are a member. Like
a guest is, and then basically on the other side, if you're a hotel and you need to participate in Expedia, even if you want to really wrangle your share and lower it down, you're signing their terms, and their terms are they may break parity for if it's an opaque rate like Hotwire, right? Or if it's part of a package, it's bundled with air. And then there's this nebulous thing called a standalone rate, not generally available to all users. And that's what they're using to undercut so many hotels right now. And the hotels aren't aware of it. And it's why their Expedia share is going up and up and up. So you're paying 20% to Expedia just for their margin and 10% for this discount, right, that they're eating into, that they require you to give them. And then they also use this accelerator that they're like, well, if you really want your hotel to appear at the top of search results, give us another 5%. So now you have started, I've just checked in and I paid $200 at your incredibly affordable hotel. $35 has now gone to someone else. What do you think? I mean, after the hotel pays the operational costs, the mortgage and the team and the staff and the mints on the pillow, I would guess they're operating profit is often less than $35, right? So Expedia has turned these hotels, independent hotels in particular, into indentured servants. It sounds extreme, but if you dig into this and see what's happening, I would challenge someone to say, no, that these extreme rents aren't occurring. I was talking to a Cornell professor last week and pointing this out to him, and he was astonished. But it is happening. And again, hoteliers aren't aware of it. So coming back to loyalty in a program like Stash, we're a program where we provide member rates as well. We don't tell our partners what to do, but they can offer a rate that is at least as good as the member rate that Expedia is offering to their One Key guests, and go $1 less than that, and then make sure that booking comes direct. If you do that, you're saving 20%, right? And that's money that goes right to the bottom line. And the single best way to increase NOI and RevPAR is reducing OTA share. That's it, right? Because every dollar that I save, unlike increased occupancy, where I have to pay for the room and the upkeep of that, anything I'm getting away from Expedia is I'm just recapturing that revenue.
Yeah, it's a lot to follow, right? Because you're, as a hotelier or even just an operator in any shape or form, you look at this as kind of the two-edged sword or two-sided sword, where if you don't list on them, you get less bookings, because at the end of the day, they're paying billions and billions of dollars on top of Google paying billions and billions of dollars for search, for the right of being in front of the travel. Yeah, being right in front of the traveler before you. Independents don't have that budget. Even a chain brand doesn't, like an Autograph hotel, doesn't have that budget to keep up. Yeah, they're probably spending some money for keyword search and other things, but at the end of the day, they can't compete with all these OTAs and the sub brands that they also have and the domains that they've just become behemoths. But then you do list on them, and you then have the rep that tells you, hey, you listed a little too low on your website versus our website. You can't give booking.com that rate. You actually have to raise that to, oh, by the way, when, we have the next check-in come in, it's going to be one of our One Key program people, and they got, like you said, 35% off, and you're basically making $65 on this hotel. And so the margins don't make sense anymore. It's no longer a win-win-win situation where I would assume back in the day when OTAs were first created, it was like, hey, we're going to help you fill in empty rooms. Great. I'll pay you for those empty rooms that you fill.
Right.
That's a fair trade deal. But now it's kind of like a gatekeep situation. You don't have the data to personalize your experience. You don't have the margin to keep up good profitability for being, as my friend Josiah McKenzie says, the oxygen to provide good hospitality. Profitability should be the oxygen for curated moments and experiences. And at the end of the day, the OTAs are just getting fatter and fatter and fatter and bigger, and the pie gets smaller and smaller and not bigger.
And they're using that money, as you're saying, they're taking your margin, right?
Yeah.
And they're just putting it in front of Google. They're the top 10 advertisers on Google. They're just buying your keyword. People have already decided they're going to go stay at Bellevue Club. We know that, right? But then they get in the way at the Google level, and they guide you to book direct because the rate's lower. Now they have One Key. And to your point, right? So there goes $50 that could have otherwise been spent to enhance the guest experience or pay their team better, right? Instead, it's just being sucked out of the system. When we started this, Jan Freitag at STR had estimated that the $1 billion leak of the OTAs, right, was $1 billion. The $1 billion leak skipped to estimated, or Mark Storkov estimated, I think last year, that it's now $32 billion that's just being pulled away. And what is it they're providing, right? You can say, oh, well, they're providing this search feature. They're not, because most searches now begin on Google, right? They're just they're just standing in front of your hotel and taking the money of the person as they're walking in. I'll take that 200, and then they hand you 150. It's astonishing. And it's very, very hard for independents to fight back. Member rates is a big way to do it. And then, of course, loyalty programs are. Free loyalty programs like Stash, because if you book indirect, you don't get your points. You can use points to guide people to book direct and explain why it is good. I think one of the huge advantages of Expedia is that consumers aren't aware of how devastating it can be for hoteliers, right? Hoteliers aren't making tons of money these days. And lots of travelers want to support the hotel they love, and yet they'll still book through an OTA because they just don't know the cost of that to the hotel.
Yeah. Can I ask you this question in terms of, so the big conversation over the last couple of years, especially we have to give all the credit to COVID, unfortunately, but a lot of people that started adopting alternative accommodations or even hotels that list on Airbnb, right? The term, oh, we're staying at an Airbnb. We're staying at an Airbnb. We're staying at an Airbnb. Airbnb is not cleaning the toilets. Airbnb is not checking you in. Airbnb is not cleaning the unit or the home after you leave, right? They're the OTA. They're the brand that you booked on, the platform that you booked on. Today, I would say consumers only know of brands or independent or even chain alike sometimes these days because of the OTA now. I booked on Expedia. I'm a genius booker on booking.com or whatever.
Yeah.
The OTA's brand has become so dominant to the point where Airbnb is now the Kleenex of short-term rentals. So do you think it's a hard conversation. It's a hard point because that $1 billion leak that you're talking about, and I think that you articulate pretty well in the $32 billion leak that has become now, 16 billion of that $32 billion leak is going towards advertising. So it's like they're trying to keep up, but it's shifting so quickly. They're trying to become the brand. They're trying to become, and I will give them this, a lot of hotel websites kind of suck. Booking engines are not easy. They're not sexy. They're not great in terms of the design and product use case. So the OTAs are putting money towards product and design, and Airbnb being an example, like click, booked. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy. There's very little friction in that process. So is there ways that you think the industry can catch up or carve out its independence again?
I think Airbnb and Expedia are very different in a way, in that Airbnb created a marketplace that didn't exist before. And one way to define the monopolistic power of, or the fair rent that a company extracts is what happens if that company disappears. So if Airbnb it disappears, how am I going to find that little farmhouse in Italy that I otherwise could find, or that history teacher in Florence who's going to walk through the city with me in a completely different way than a big tour. That they've created that value, and it's extraordinary, I think, right? If they disappeared, it disappears. I know that they charge a lot too. In contrast, if Expedia disappeared right now, what changes? And what is it that justifies a 20% fee? Right? When I was there 15 years ago, the most innovative thing that had happened was the launch of the first loyalty program. In the past 15 years, Amazon has gone from selling primarily books and videos to now being able to deliver anything I dream of in 6 hours to my front doorstep. Mm-hmm. Uber has created an entirely different landscape, right? Our world has changed so significantly. What is the primary innovation that Expedia has created and delivered to the world in that 15 years? I don't know, other than creating one key that's just a stronger version of what we created, and is just a tool to further extract value from their partners, in air quotes, because that's what they call it, partner services. Here's a good definition of whether you consider a company you work with a partner. When they call you or knock on your door, is that something you're excited about, or is it fearful? Talk to hoteliers. How do they feel about their call from their market manager? Is it a call that is, hey, how can we help you find more guests? Or is it, you are in violation of some provision of our agreement, or I want to extract more money from this? I don't know of another, I'm trying to think of another business now that takes so much out of the ecosystem while providing so little. Maybe that should be their motto. Again, as I said to you
really
before,
feel,
I have to look under my car every morning for fear that it blows up, or I should say, I have my wife in the car. But this sounds crazy until you keep digging and you find the truth to it. Right? They are leveraging near monopolistic or duopolistic powers, right, to take an unfair portion of the booking, the transaction, and the revenue from a hotel stay. You could say when Rich Barton was at Microsoft 20 years ago, and he came up with the idea of Expedia, they were creating something that didn't exist, this index of hotels that how else would I find them? He talks about he wanted to create, you would call up a travel agent or meet with a travel agent, and they would go type, and they would say, this is available, this is available. He said, I want to bring that forward so that consumers can see that. Totally, that's what they did. But now, so does Kayak, so does Booking, so does TripAdvisor, so does Google, all for free. So what is the unique information that they are providing into the world that allows them to charge that much? Other than what they'll say is, we're bringing customers to your hotel. But again, those are customers who were going to come anyhow for the most part because they found you through Google.
I'm curious about the search piece because I think search, from my lens, it's harder and harder. I think with the amount of content and the amount of inventory, it's the same thing that kind of comes up in the podcast world or in any type of content creation sector, is that with feeds getting so inundated with content and the short form or whatever, right? Like you just get buried, right? Like you go on Instagram today, you watch something, 30 seconds later, you're digging just to find it again after scrolling or doing whatever. And I feel like the same thing has kind of happened on Google, where there's just so many websites or so many links. Do I actually get discovered on Google? Do you guys hear of hoteliers actually using Google or getting traffic through Google outside of the OTAs that does bring reservations or guests to their door?
I think more than 60% of all hotel bookings involve Google at some point, right? And then perhaps a third of that leads comes directly through the search results channel that's leading to that the meta search table, which is basically, here's 9 different versions of Booking and Expedia pretending to be different with different rates, right? And then the sole official site of the hotelier, which if they're really paying attention, should be the lowest rate. And they, again, can do that with member rates. Google is bidding on those. You can just, it's just a search engine marketing too. You're just bidding on that. But meta search in particular has become this really critical funnel where a lot of hoteliers are not loading rates, because at that point it is a rate decision. I am going to go stay at the Lennox Hotel. Now I'm just looking at which rate is the best, and I would say more than 80% of the time the best rate is not on at the official site of the hotel, and they're just not aware of that because Google. Expedia has a search engine marketing team of hundreds, and most hotels, independent hotels in particular, are doing many, many things, and they may not have that expertise. But if they set that rate, and particularly if they have a member rate, it can show up. Google will allow it to show up if it's part of a free club as the official site that's below the bar rate. They're allowed to do that, and Expedia accepts that.
Interesting. Yeah, I just feel like it's such a feed game, right? Where you're just trying to be at the top as long as possible until the next recycled inventory comes in or whatever.
Yeah, that's almost, because again, at the meta search level, it's, I have found the hotel, I'm deciding where to book, right?
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. It's less a discovery than it is a purchase decision.
True.
Which outlet am I purchasing from? Discovery. I think a lot of people still use. Well, my colleague makes fun of me. I use TripAdvisor because I'm going to Denver. How am I going to find out which is the best hotel? TripAdvisor, and then also Google does a really good job of this now. But certainly in those cases, Marriott and others buy up those keywords. Will try to guide you to their properties first. Yeah,
that's true. The discovery piece is, I think, that you hit that nail on the head. It's the discovery rather than the purchase decision portion of that journey. Jeff, if there's one, like, we know how you feel about Expedia.
I think it's a wonderful company. Just when you cut out this, you can replace this with this clip. It's a well-managed, wonderful company that has brought efficiency and great value to the traveling public. Just drop that in instead of my rant.
Well, I was gonna say, with the listener, I know how you feel. I agree. I think there's like, you make a good point in the terms of like, right, Amazon has created basically instant delivery through innovation, through yes, their pricing is
that's value,
through membership,
right?
That is value. Expedia, not so much. It's still reliant on the hotel, right? The hotel has to create that value. The operator on Airbnb has to create that value at the end of the day. It feels like there's more. This is a conversation that's been happening a lot on and off the pod. And it just feels like there's more and more people and companies and technologies trying to get a sliver of the pie rather than to make the pie bigger. And I love that analogy because I think we can all make the pie bigger. We can all, build a bigger table, bring more to the table. And Danny Meyer says this in his book, Setting the Table. Literally, hospitality is a team sport. And I don't feel like a lot of the people or maybe not people, but a lot of the companies involved in our sector or in our industry anymore see it that way. It's a very much like middleman after middleman after middleman after middleman. And then by the end of the time, the money gets to the operator who actually cleans and does the maintenance and gives the good guest experience, is left with pennies. And it almost, I'm sure this is why you see the change in the hotel chain shift, right? Where you're talking about, back in the day, it was probably like 50% of the hotels were independents. Now it's like 20%. They're going towards chains because they're tired of fighting for pennies. And I think, it's a common thing. I know this is something you guys are trying to change with Stash. But how does, and kind of a final question or like kind of a two-parter for you, how does the industry get back on the same team? And B, what other things for you, from your perspective, from what you see with the hoteliers you talk to every day in the last 15 years, what else is missing or not missing? What else can change in our industry to get back to our core of hospitality? I'm sure that piece is kind of missed a lot, but the two-parter for you, so I'm sorry to kind of spread it.
Well, on the second part of it comes back to what we were first talking about personalization and customization of that experience. Again, Expedia wants to prevent that in a way. They will not share profile information with a hotel because they want to own that relationship. They will not share. We all use, what's your universal ID in life now? It's your email address, right? That's how your bank account and your Amazon, it's all the same. They won't share that email address with the hotelier. So the hotelier is unable to create a profile that would allow for the kind of customization and personalization that could be, achieve special, right? That should be a goal of like a really one-of-a-kind experience. I think about hotels. I collect old hotel postcards. That used to be a thing. You would go check in a hotel and it'd be like a postcard because you'd write, "Dear Beatrice, just checked into the Fairmont Hotel. We'll be home in 3 weeks by train." But like that was staying at the hotel was part of that experience and something you wanted to tell others about. Let the hotel cook. Let the hotel provide a unique experience and share that information that allows them to do that. Expedia, you primarily were bad-mouthing Expedia a lot about what they're doing in terms of pricing. We didn't even talk about the idea that they're not sharing any data, right? And so data is key to making a better experience. They're not doing and won't allow that at all. So I think when we were gathering, I mentioned this data that we gather and then share with our partners. I said to one of our partners, the best ideas about Stash come from the hoteliers we work with, right? So we come up with an idea and or just a notion and they'll help us craft it. And I said, well, if we were to gather this information that Will loves the Denver Nuggets and he also is allergic to asparagus, what would you do with that information? Do we have to sort of mandate you're going to do anything? And they said, no, that's what we love to do. If we had that information and we have time, right, we will run with that. That is what we are in hospitality. It comes back to this whole notion. If I had that information, I can then empower my team who will be so inspired to do something special. So I may have shared with you in one of the profiles of our members, they had said, oh, they like, seltzer water and red wine. And at the very bottom in this open field where we write anything else we should know, they wrote, I love Elton John. And so this was at the Grove Hotel. So the front desk team, Marriott would say, if someone says they love a rock star, you should have that music of that rock star playing on the clock radio when they check it. We didn't do that. We just said, here's some interesting information. The front desk team had some extra time, so they printed out 10 pictures of Elton John, put them in frames, and put them all over the person's room when they went and checked in. Imagine what that feels like. Like, do you feel recognized and special? And is that something you're going to, if they had that postcard, write about to your friend and saying, the Grove Hotel is so amazing. I love how they see me as a person and will always go above and beyond to make me feel welcomed. Isn't that, in a nutshell, what the goal of all of us is, what we're trying to do? So our job at Stash, and I think as other technology providers and marketing and organizations that help hotels, is do the things that help hotels do that, right? Allow them to find efficient ways to find guests and turn that money and give that money back to their team, right? Help them pay the bills, help them upgrade the lobby, help them create a better guest experience, and then provide them with the data that allows that experience to be special, because that is the point of differentiation. And again, I'm so bullish in independence because they're the ones that are able to do this, and we're just the conduit that allows them to compete against these two enormous Goliaths, which is the Marriotts of the world and Expedia, who have these enormous advantages. But I'm bullish on the spirit of the inspired, fiercely independent hotelier, right? At the end of the day, they'll win. Our goal, we provide them with the tools to do that. So even though there's this diminishing, the independence endangered, there's still this fierce set that continue to compete. And I won't count them out yet. We're doing our best to help them.
Yeah. Well, and I do believe I know we have to wrap up the episode, but I do believe we are in a world where we do have the tools at our disposal. When I launch my own hotel, which I want, is a dream of mine to do. I want to buy a hotel out here in Colorado and create a whole experiential brand. I believe I can do it without OTAs. I believe it. I believe there's tools out there that you can do it. You can gather the emails, you can gather the data, you can utilize it to your best ability, and you can put people in the right seats to execute, right? To be moment makers. And I think if enough people showcase that, whether it's an independent currently today that goes from 60% OTA bookings to 30 and increases their book direct by 30%, I think that's a huge win. That's another showcase of what the tools at our disposal can do for us as brands. So it's not impossible. It is a bigger fight though. It takes time. It takes resources. It takes education. It takes a lot of endurance, I would say, because it is hard. As I think the hospitality space is behind e-commerce, it's behind all these things are very like user-friendly generated products and features and things like that, which we've maybe focused too much on the people business and not enough in innovation of tech. But that's a whole another open can of worms. So anyways, I think it can happen. I think it can, but it's figuring out what data you need to collect. It's figuring out how to actually implement the execution of that data for proper personalization and not just a fluff word of, I gave Jeff
and giving a reason, note. Right?
Yeah.
You can create this wonderful experience at your property that will be delivered no matter what channel they come through, right? That's where the trick is. You'll need to convince that guest that it's to their advantage, but also to your advantage as the hotel that they have affinity for them to book direct. It hurts you when they book indirect. Can you explain that to them? People don't know that at all. And so that education is sort of a hand-to-hand education. And that's very hard when they have so much marketing. They have, they had that Star Wars guy, Ewan McGregor. Is that him? Right. They had the last campaign that I saw, they had him. They have Tina Fey or me that's booking. they just have so much money and are seen as a facilitator of efficiency in travel. They don't see the cost of it. Anyhow, thank you so much for chatting with me. No one else will talk to me about this anymore. Because maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy theorist but as you dig in, you see that it is what's happening. And it's almost like ring the bell and make sure people are aware of it. And to your point, what can they do? Yeah, deploy the right technology, educate your guests, and don't be hoodwinked, right? Pay attention and see where those bookings are coming from and staunch that bleeding.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Jeff, I'm always honored and happy to have you back on the show. So if other people want to talk to you, you're always welcome here.
Thank you. I appreciate the therapy session. Send me your bill.
Of course. I feel like this conversation is happening behind closed doors. It's happening publicly on online forums or social media platforms like LinkedIn. I see it all the time. And I think a lot of people are questioning about why they got into the business when at the end of the day, sometimes it starts feeling like it's their business, right? Where, it's just, we get into this industry for a reason. You know, you blink and 5 years later or X amount of years later go by and it feels like it's all changed and you kind of lost a piece of yourself along the way and people try to get back to it, right? Like it's just, I don't know. Maybe that's not how everyone feels listening to it, but I think there's a lot of operators out there that truly do care about how this is all impacting our businesses today. And, 4 years ago, I would say OTAs are more or less a partner. They're a friend. And now it seems to shift a little bit more away from that each day. And I've seen it, which I hate because I know plenty of people that used to just use them as gap fillers. They were never an actual dominant booker. It was just a gap.
That's their promise. And I would just say, to your point, this sort of passion with which I speak about this is exactly what you hear talking to any hotelier. I don't have a hotel, so they can't come and hit me over the head. Hoteliers won't talk about it because they're afraid of retribution. What does that alone say about a relationship with a third party? I would say how I really feel about the structure of this partnership, but I'm afraid that you're going to stuff me to the bottom of search results. That's chilling, I think.
Yeah. If any
look under your car,
episode I am now.
You're complicit.
I can't turn on my microphone without having it potentially pop smoke, blow up in my face. Ginger on the episode before this, she mentioned, obviously like doesn't want the OTAs to come after it, but there is an issue, right? There is an issue when your business and control of your business stops being yours. So anyways,
that's a great
Jeff,
sentiment. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for being on the podcast. Thank you for what you guys are doing at Stash. For all the listeners, where can we send them to check out, connect with you, learn more if they're interested?
So stashrewards.com is our URL. And from there, you can inquire through our hoteliers page about whether your hotel is a fit for the program. And if you're just an inspired traveler, you can sign up for Stash in about 12 seconds. And we currently have, I think, almost 330 extraordinary independent hotels across North America. These are the hotels that you want to stay at, but you probably have not heard of because they don't have that marketing budget. Thanks so much for your time, Bill. I really enjoyed being on your show.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. All right, Slick Talkers. Okay. So grab the link in the show notes. And of course, like always, show Jeff the same love that you guys show the podcast each and every week. And like always, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.